In this episode of The Briefing Room, we find out how an Aussie founder who left Australia 20 years ago to build a tech company came to be one of our latest investors in the fund. Rob Castaneda founded ServiceRocket in 2001 in Sydney, moved the company to Palo Alto during the global financial crisis. Today, ServiceRocket has around 240 people across 10 countries. Rob shares why it is genuinely easier to grow a tech company in the US than in Australia and why the founder has to be the one who moves. And he also shares what he's looking for in the next generation of talent. Welcome to The Briefing Room. Whether you're in defence, investing into the future, or simply curious about how great ideas become reality, this is your mission briefing. Let's get started.
I'm Rob Castaneda, founder and CEO of ServiceRocket. It's a company that I started in 2001 in Sydney, Australia. I began the company, it was actually called Custom Wear Asia Pacific.
One of those really long names. One of those really long names.
Yeah, so what happened was that I did an internship at a Sydney office of a Silicon Valley company called Borland.
Okay.
Borland was the poor competitor to Microsoft in those days. And I worked on the help desk. That was my first internship in my first year of uni. So I started when I was 17 on the help desk. And I fell in love with this technology. And I was pretty quickly immersed into this new wave of stuff that came from the US. We would get this CD and on it was this thing called Java. It was codenamed Latte. Was a build of a product that they had. Mm-hmm. And that was for JBuilder, which was Borland's product in that space. Mm-hmm. And so this is 1997, 98.
Yep.
And I had never been on a plane before in my life. So I grew up in Western Sydney in Toongabie and somehow snuck into UTS to do computer science, grabbed this internship. And from that, I got, thrown on the help desk, started working with customers. And an opportunity came to start teaching customers new technology. And because I nerded out, geeked out on the tech, Ray, the local managing director there said, okay, you're up, go for it. And he gave me a lot of opportunities to get in front of customers, speak in front of them. And from that, I got my first ever flight, which I went to Brisbane. Right. And then I went to Singapore, and then I got to go to the Borland conference in Philadelphia.
Right.
So here I am as an 18-year-old, catching a plane for the first time. It was pretty good.
That's amazing. And also because you said yes to the internship opportunity, and then generally, you couldn't be put in a better position than the customer help desk because you're listening to the problems every single day.
Yeah, I think help desk and support is often looked down.
Yes, but that's where the gold is, right? That's where all the problems are.
It's where you learn to work in the interface between the technology and the people. And we're actually seeing a full circle of this right now as all of a sudden software has been devalued in the markets. And there's this huge push into services now. And really the push is for context. AI models need context, but any technology project needs the organizational context in order for it to work. And so the world's really realizing that. So through Borland, I met an entrepreneur over here and I moved over to Silicon Valley to teach Java and teach J2EE, the Java Enterprise Edition. I had worked in some open source projects. I was just really into the community. There was an open source project called JBoss that I had contributed to. And I even got to author a part of a book. And it's kind of weird how this happens at that stage as a 20-year-old. Yeah. You build up a name on a forum and people reach out to you. And
yeah, well, that's the thing. To the forums, what were you using then? What were the main forums?
Well, I was either on all of the JBoss forums or on the Borland forum.
Okay.
And it was product support. And, in those times, Borland didn't have the leading product in the enterprise Java space. We were scrambling, the engineers were scrambling to build and catch up. And so the forums were not a happy place, right? It's where all the customers were airing out their dirty laundry. And I learned that providing great service and being responsive and showing empathy and repeating problems and working through things could actually diffuse customers that were upset and turn them from detractors into promoters, even if you hadn't solved the problem. So I kept down that path. I ended up moving to the US to work for a company called Customware. Hence why when after a year of doing that and flying around the US and teaching courses for lots of different companies all over the US and getting an appreciation for many things, the dot-com boom, the size of the American market, the way they do business in such a frictionless manner, right? Things just move. And so friendly as well. So the market crashed. I came back to Sydney to get married and still happily married to Amy. We went to high school together, so I came back and there was work locally. So I created Customware Asia Pacific, meaning for it to be a subsidiary of the US company. And the US company then merged with another company. And I was invited back, but I was like, look, I'm going to settle back in Australia for a little while. And I kept going on my own. And so Customware, my version of Customware, a few months after that, I got introduced to Mike Cannon-Brooks and Scott Farquhar from Atlassian, who were also in the Java enterprise space doing services and support. And they had just started work on this thing called Jira. And we were like a block away from each other in Sydney and got introduced via Silicon Valley.
Right. That's
it's
so
kind of funny. Right?
Typical. It is funny and crazy, but it also sort of makes sense in a roundabout way.
Yeah. And so we then did, again, the context around the Atlassian products.
Right.
Taking care of customers and what they were trying to do and mapping between their needs and where the technology was at. And I think services is about that. It's about putting the customer first and trying to get one step ahead of them, but also going back to help them up to where they want to go and being the first follower for them and navigating lots of tricky things. But so I built the company in Australia, built a great team, many lessons, and it's my first business, learning, basically learning finance, learning people management, learning sales and all that.
What was the hardest part of that?
The hardest part, I would say that the journey of a founder-led, company that is, I think the company's evolution really matches closely to the founder's evolution as a person. Mm-hmm. And here I was, a pretty young and experienced person, getting into tech, learning about the world, learning about leadership. And I think if I go back, I'll probably learn more leadership skills and things earlier on. I think we can hide behind the compiler or hide behind the IDE or hide behind the tech and avoid difficult conversations. And those difficult conversations are leadership.
That's right. And those things don't go away. They will linger until you manage them.
Unless you deliberately ignore them because okay, I can put a fence around that. I know what's going to come back later. Mm-hmm. You do need to tackle a lot of things before they get out of hand. But do them in a way that doesn't distract you so that you're not constantly just doing that. You've got to move the company and move the agenda ahead. Yeah. To do that. So maybe around 2008, 2009, working with the then president of Atlassian, we started servicing US customers quite heavily for Atlassian from Australia. And I think I had done over $1 million of business with the US selling on the phone and the internet from Sydney, just by getting up at 5 a.m. and pretending I was on the West Coast.
So they didn't know where you were based. You were always,
the customers
they didn't need to.
The customers did know because they, obviously the accent, my accent's a bit mixed, but it was Australian enough then. And, but what made it work is that Atlassian was Australian. Yes. So they were like, oh, we are expecting Australian service. Thank goodness we have an Australian, right? And I think one of the things that we take for granted, I think, as Australians is that we're generally well liked. Mm-hmm. We can thank Paul Hogan and a few of the previous generation for doing that.
Yes, yeah.
A bit of a pet peeve now is that most Australians that come to the US complain about coffee. And I would rather us be more positive than to find something to complain about.
Yes.
That's my little recommendation or plea.
So what was the relationship? So when you're working with Atlassian, what was the actual relationship there between the two entities or your role? How did that work?
Yeah, we've always been separate companies and I treat them as my number one customer.
Okay. So essentially they're a customer of yours.
Yeah, even if they don't pay me, I treat them as my customer because I am servicing their customers, and the more that I can align everybody together, the faster everything goes. So they do pay us from time to time to do things like our team built their first training offerings. We built their first support desk up until about 70 people. We built product for them before. So we'll do a bunch of stuff with them and for them.
Yes.
But the majority of our money comes from the end customer. Right now, we position ourselves not as the biggest, not as the fastest, not as the cheapest. We focus on being the most reliable.
Right.
And
most reliable in what?
We're the most reliable partner for our customers to help them accelerate their growth with Atlassian products.
Right.
And so that's what we position, and that's what we do. And it's almost like saying, if you had a 1968 fancy sports car, or, a Mustang or something, do you want the cheapest, fastest, quickest, biggest mechanic, or do you want a person who really knows what they're doing and is really reliable? And so from a services perspective, you can apply that to your accountant. You can apply it to your cleaner. You can apply it to any service provider. Mm-hmm. You always want the most reliable. And so we focus on driving that culture and that messaging on being the most reliable.
So why wasn't this ever a service that Atlassian themselves provided?
I think for up until this year, I think services. I actually just had lunch with an industry mentor, and he said, "Hey, we're back around from 25 years ago. 25 years ago, services was hot. When the .com boom happened, there were companies. There was one called March 1st. It was US Web. There were these services companies that got created to turn everybody into internet businesses. Yep. So services in general doesn't scale the same way that software does.
Yes.
And so services is frowned upon from an investor point of view, traditionally, because the profits or the money or the revenue you make there wasn't valued at the same multiple as software multiples. Mm-hmm. Those multiples in the last year have changed. Yes. So, and OpenAI, Anthropic, Google have announced a very large injection of cash and attention into this whole area of services. They're calling it FDEs now, which is forward deployed engineers.
Right.
And an FDE is kind of a specialized consultant that is very technical, knows the product really well, and goes in, gets something done, kind of gets out. I think FDEs help. They get more context by being on the ground with the customer, but I think they still may lack the full organizational political context of the customer they're working in. But I think services is becoming a lot more valuable these days as we go to AI and all the big LLMs and frontier models realize that, oh, wow. And Palantir is another example. Unless we get in there and do it, the customers don't do it. They're not quick enough. They don't get it.
That's right.
They've got too many data.
It's a lot of upskilling. Yeah, that's right. A lot of upskilling and onboarding.
Yeah. So services it's not as scalable. Like you can't just print 1,000 of them and make it happen, but it's an essential part of the ecosystem. And I mean, Accenture has 780,000 people, so it kind of scales. But I think it just scales. It's just a different business model. And I think now it's coming more and more into fashion. Definitely my inbox is very full of investors looking to invest in this space of services and doing that. Yeah.
And so is that just because of the shift to AI, or they can understand the need for services to be involved in the onboarding and the maintenance?
Yeah, a combination. I think the multiples of software are down as the market resets and tries to work out and sort the cream from the crop. There are some of the firms that I'm talking to, they're talking a longer term bet, saying, well, we think services is going to be around for a long time and we want to, get proactive in this area. And it's usually the services that have the stronger relationships that can drive and listen to what's happening and can also guide the customer on where they're going.
Interesting. So something that started off in 2001, how many people do you have now?
We're sitting at about 240. I think at our peak, we were over 300. We've had some exits, like we built some products and we sold them off a couple of years back. It kept the engineering and product group, but really focused and doubled down on some of the cloud work that we were doing. And so for me, it's trying to keep around that number for now. And then what we've been doing, we partner with a few other companies and get some scale further that way. But we're in like 10 countries around the world. I kind of think of it like services is a little bit like baking a cake or a recipe that like some things just can't be sped up.
No.
You know, you have to let them set properly before you build on top of them. And definitely in our space, there's been a lot of acquisitions and M&A and investing, and a lot of the folks who have tried to speed that up haven't necessarily succeeded. So
yeah. So what role do services play in that environment in particular?
in the environment for Atlassian or
In general? Like if you
in general? Yeah, I mean, we're working with some of the largest, if not the largest companies in the world around here. Yeah. And they've got tens of thousands of employees. They're making hardware, chips, software, the whole stack. Mm-hmm. And the way I view it is that those companies, and I think every company is basically like a giant conveyor belt, right? Like every company exists to produce a product. And that's the main thing that it does. And then you have all of these different teams that contribute to doing that. And what we work on doing is optimizing that process. And sometimes that's getting folks aligned on the tooling. It's migrating them and combining systems together, because a number of these companies acquire a new business every week or two.
Yes.
And so they bought something. If they can't plug into that giant conveyor belt, how do they communicate and work with the other teams, and how do they get the leverage from that? So there's been a lot of migration work, a lot of consolidation work, getting data graphs right. And if you get your data graph right, then AI works a lot better because it has the right context. If you slop a whole bunch of things together and think that it's automated, or think that, you know, AI will do it, then over time you'll have some gaps. And so we just focus on doing things properly. Our customers love the way we engage, and they have a good say in how we engage, and we partner very closely. And I think most of our projects are three-way partnerships between Atlassian, the customer, and us. And we all wear one jersey when we do the projects. Our team doesn't just go and collect timesheets and throw bills at customers. We actually work, and our aim is to transform those businesses.
Yeah, that makes sense, and definitely can see the need for it and the increasing need for it. Now, you've recently become an LP into Beaten Zone Venture Partners. Yeah. Were you interested in defense before?
I'm in a couple of other funds, mostly technology infrastructure. And with the way the world is, defense and defense technology, especially what Palmer Luckey is doing at Enderall, yes, kind of followed that. And it was very intriguing how Silicon Valley, I think, 5-6 years ago, was on one side of politics, and Palmer Luckey kind of moved to the other side and said, hey, if we don't get ahead of some of these things here, we're not going to be in a good place. And a couple of those podcasts there. And so when I saw Beaten Zone, I'm saying, okay, this is great, because it's a good combination of giving back. I think there's a huge market opportunity in terms of similar journey to myself, right? When we do things in Australia, we tend to not think as big. And a lot of the media coverage of the US in Australia is quite biased. And I think in Australia, we think of America as one thing. You get over here and you realize that there's so many different cities, towns, states, and
all operating differently.
all operating different, and there's opportunities, but I think yes, just the American mindset is
totally
half full.
Yes.
Right. And it's kind of weird because we have this fair go concept in Australia, but it's kind of like fair go, but if you're too successful, hold back.
It's exactly. It's to your detriment. I think there's more conversation around that now than ever before, because it's becoming it's really obvious. Before we kind of might have known about it, but now a lot more people are actually calling it out and saying, even though we can say we need to behave differently and not have such a great degree of tall poppy syndrome, it hasn't really shifted. There's an awareness of it. Whether the behavior change follows is yet to be decided.
I think a part of it is leadership. And I think you hit a good level of leadership when you really don't care what other people think, because you have strong principles and strong values. And if those are grounded, then commentary, like take in feedback, take in the data points, take in the feedback from your team, empathize really strongly, But external commentary, I don't know how useful it is either way, right? If someone gives me a bunch of flattering compliments, but they don't know what I do, then how is that any useful? How is
That's
that
right.
useful as well?
Yeah,
right?
how genuine is it? How much do they know?
So it kind of goes both ways from that. So I actually think it's strength in leadership and principles and values. And, there are more and more Australian entrepreneurs and business people standing up and doing that, which is great. So I think with giving back, I'm doing a bunch of work with UTS startups. I'm back in Australia every month or two, and I try and help out there. And so with what the team is doing.
What's your aim when you do that? When you say, when people give their time like that, for example, what are you hoping to get across when you're in front of students at UTS? Is it to paint a different version of what the future holds or where potential is, or to share what's possible through lived experience?
Yeah, it's a couple of things. It's like I always open up and tell them that I grew up in Toongabie.
And they're not expecting it.
There's always someone that comes out of the woodwork and says, "Hey, I'm from Blacktown, or I'm from Seven Hills or Pendle Hill or somewhere like close by." And so I think when I grew up, there was this stigma of being from out west that even I used to have to catch a train to go to uni in an hour and a bit each way. And so I think it's all of us, especially the younger generation or younger people, learn from emulation. So if they can see what's been done, they'll oh, great, I can follow some footsteps. So that's one part of it. The second part is really you don't know what you're going to get until the future, right? So I don't generally look for ROI on every single thing that I do. I know if I put good things out into the world, somewhere they'll have an impact at some time, maybe, and that's okay. And so I think with a lot of the work that Murray Herbst is doing at UTS and the whole team there, and just encouraging people and building more of a culture. So you combine the fact that we have really smart people, services is on the rise. We're great services people in Australia. Yeah. And we have great technology. We tend to think, oh, let me get it going in Australia and then I'll go to the other side of the world. And I think it's more, hey, you know what? It's actually easier to grow a business in the US than Australia. It is easier.
So, all right, let's just unpack that one a little bit. I mean, as I mentioned at the beginning of our discussion, we say this in literally every episode, and I worry sometimes that the listeners might get bored of us saying it, but I know you're probably going to say it in a different way. So easier in what sense?
This is my perspective. I'm not an economist, right? But the American consumer spends like crazy, okay, and is riddled with debt. So they spend more than they have. And so we might look at that and say, well, that's not good. You should save and so forth. But if the consumers spend and spend and spend, who do they buy things from? They buy things from businesses, and then businesses have to keep up. And where do businesses buy things from? Other businesses. So this flow on an effect with the economy. And it reminds me like the first time I tried to sell something in New Zealand. Yep. And just from Australia, and I was in New Zealand, it was like, oh my goodness, the amount of questions these guys ask me just to sell something that's 10 grand. It's like we're getting blood out of a stone. Yeah. And then so what's the comparison? I would call up US customers and I would close in like one phone call, 20, 30, 40K US on a phone call.
Why is that part though? That's the bit I want to know. That.
Because the middle managers or they know how to delegate budget. Okay. And so you got to work out where is the budget that the people that I'm working with, what can they spend? They have to get things done. And they spend to do things. Yes. And so in essence, you're not really selling. You're
just taking the allocation.
Yeah, you're helping the allocation from you. You know, yeah. And so whether it be defense, whether it be like the market I'm in with Atlassian, like folks need to automate their development processes and right now AI enable their teams. And they're going to do that. They've been told to do that. And they're going to talk to 3 or 4 different companies to help them do that. So you need to be able to position yourself against the alternatives, which may not always be your direct competitors. Sometimes the alternative is they'll try and do it themselves. It's kind of interesting. The customers that we work with where they try and do it themselves, we generally just let them. Okay, you guys do that, we're around, but we've got other things to do. And so I think as a culture, because of that, there's just a lot of spend. And there's a lot of spend, and it's a spending culture. So it's kind of like it's a beach that has lots of waves, and you want to learn how to surf.
Yeah, so you go one with the most waves.
And they're awesome waves.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
They're big waves, and you know what? They're easier to surf. They're not like crazy waves that are going to dump you. They're actually really big and awesome. And every now and then they're a little bit choppy. And you go to some other places, some other countries or other markets, and there's no waves.
No waves.
Right?
Or they're really hard to get on, really hard just to manage.
Yeah.
The risks are bigger.
Correct. And so I actually think, so if you're a founder and you're thinking of working with technology that's global, you need to be in the US, A, number one. B, the founder needs to be in the US. The amount of companies that I've seen where the founder stays in Australia and they send a head of sales to the US, it doesn't work.
No.
So there's a general authenticity.
I want to drill down on this a little bit because it's really important, and how you explain that and tell us why. Because there is, if the founder, so this is the situation. You're at a similar age to we see a lot of founders. For example, I'll give you a made up scenario, but it's a very real one that we see all the time. You've got someone who might be like early 30s, has a young family, have an amazing product, have taken on capital, have some customers are looking to scale into the States. Yet with the young family, want to raise the kids here, they know they need to be in the States. So this is a really big pull because a lot of Australian founders want to remain Australian for this lifestyle and have the story, yet also have the other story of expanding and having success overseas, yet they have to move the entire family or do the dual country residency and go backwards and forwards. How did you manage that between family, making that decision at that age?
Amy and I, my wife, I think we decided very early that home is where we are together.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing. And so having that grounding allowed us to prioritize what we thought we wanted to do. And it's kind of interesting because both my parents migrated to Australia. My father was from El Salvador and my mother from Malta. And so it's kind of interesting because I did a talk at one of the awards programs, and I reflected that, hey, now I'm the immigrant on the other side of the world, chasing the next thing. And so I think it's actually more common. I mean, there's so many Australians over here. Sometimes it's a little bit crazy, but I think it's more, I would go back to the thing that I said earlier, which is the growth of the company is the growth of the leader.
Yes.
And the decision to move, just like the decision to create a company.
It's like you can't get a better statement of commitment to the
leadership
mission.
Decision, because it was interesting when I was going to move, it was the financial crisis.
Right. So challenging.
Right? And everyone told me that I was crazy to do this. Everybody. Not one person was supportive except for my board. And I presented to my board and I said, look, the Aussie dollar has shot up. The US market has crashed. So actually in this office that I am now, we got that back then for less than $1 a square foot.
It's crazy.
Right? And at the peak, it went to 6 or 7. Right. So not only could I get over here, Atlassian was still doing strong. Their metrics were great, just like they are now. Right. Their metrics were really strong. And I knew the future was here. And it was kind of like when you play a video game and you're playing Mario Brothers and you got to jump on the log.
To do the jump. Yeah.
And it was like, all the data I had, it was like, it's an easy jump. And I did. And so I came over here. We stayed in an Airbnb that right now would be 10 times what we paid back then. So again, I was a services company, which allows us to be malleable and flexible, frugal as ever, because we're Australian, finding the best deals and navigating things. Because the market had crashed, it was actually easier for me to hire people.
Talent was available. When you said that your board were the only ones in support of the decision, how long had you had? Had you had a board from the beginning?
No, I had put the board together, maybe 6 to 12 months just before that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And can I just ask, not who, but the type of people that were on your board?
So we actually had a former PwC partner who actually was the chairman of the board. That was Andrew Schnedden, who's now retired, but he had done flipping to the US with ResMed and the IPO and so tech, work with Australia and US.
Understand the markets, yeah.
And there's a governance aspect. And then the other, Andrew's no longer on the board, but the other, we have Salil Deshpande, who was the guy who actually brought me to the US when I was 20.
Right.
He is now a VC.
Okay.
So I have that pressure, even though we haven't taken VC money. I have the VC perspective.
Yes.
And the other two folks on the board are CFOs.
Okay.
One's a practicing CFO, one's retired. Nick was the financial controller for Steve Jobs at Next Computer.
Right.
And Mike is a practicing CFO. He was at MuleSoft and GoTo and a few other companies. And so for me, it's actually very heavy on the finance.
Yep.
Just the market push. And the reason for that is services is very context specific with the customers. Mm-hmm. And so that's where and those are my blind spots, right? Let me get those there and bring it together. So we will be adding to the board, I think, in the next year. There's a few people.
But I can understand now why they were very supportive of the decision, because that was their lived experience of understanding that global market and where the opportunities.
Cycles. Yeah, I think when building a board, you have to make sure the folks are going to add value and they're going to make you feel uncomfortable. I mean, accountability is uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And you have to go towards the uncomfortable. I mean, it's kind of odd, right? The company is privately held. There's no funding, but there are board meetings where I feel physically sick going to just from the amount of pressure I put on myself.
Yeah, having to actually do all of the things that you are required to do.
And I would say there have been times when we haven't been profitable in previous years as we've been navigating stuff where I would literally lose my voice the day of the board meeting.
Yeah, your body took over. Yeah.
Yeah, it knew.
It knew this was not a good day to be having a voice. That's really interesting, and I appreciate the insights into that, because it is, I'm not saying that people don't make great choices, but understanding the unique combinations that you can possibly have, experience in the market that you're heading into will help that external perspective.
There's one thing I will say, and I said it before, Australians have a very skewed view of America. I think the media portrays a particular perspective that gets clicks and does that. My son grew up here playing Little League baseball. Mm-hmm. He was in youth football. In the teams that we coached and helped, we've had like multiple NFL players come through those. The community aspect of many things here is quite remarkable. And I felt so welcomed here. And just at home, just locally, people are friendly. Walk across the street, the cars stop. Some of these little things that happen, again, it depends the area where you're staying, but it's an amazing experience. And I think when folks are considering whether to move or not, I think schooling is important, being in a good school district. There's a whole bunch of factors to consider, but if the perspective is purely, what's on the media, I think that's not a good thing. We also have this beautiful thing called the E3 visa.
Yes.
Which is your 2-year visa. And even using that, come for a couple of years, if, get things moving to that point, I think it's a really, really strong thing to consider.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. Lots to consider there. There's no doubt there's a lot of interest in defence at the moment. There's also a lot of capital flowing in this direction, which means there will be more founders. And there's a lot of incentives and a lot of programs that are going to be created to keep seeding that level of activity. Which means there's going to be a lot of founders looking for ways forward when they make their way over to the States. What sort of advice would you have for any founders making those first connections there either in Palo Alto or wherever else they're going to be landing?
Yeah, I mean, ping people, right? My LinkedIn's open. I mean, I ping people that I don't know or I know of or that look interesting. I think our industry is overall very friendly. It's remarkable when I look back at the experiences of different people that I've met or worked with. So I think you have to put yourself out there and not, I think the imposter syndrome thing that we all suffer from, that's just energy, and that's just telling you that you're growing. And you need to use that and grow. I remember when we had moved here, we're having sushi in the restaurant, and Steve Jobs comes in with his family, and they eat sushi next to us, right? And I said hi, right? And my daughter Bella was running around his car and such. Be respectful when you reach out to people, but I wouldn't shy away from, making sure you've got something. I think the other one is that everyone is extremely busy. And so they don't necessarily have time to validate your solution or to give you the validation of the solution.
No.
And so part of that is you've got to speak up and represent what you're doing. And that goes back to, how are your principles? What are your values? How consistent are you? Yeah.
It's quite different in defense in general, simply because it's not your traditional pitching generally to the market. You're selling to the US Department of Defense. So you need your system integrators. It's very important to make those connections and be introduced the right way and spend the time. It is multiple years on the ground there plugging into those networks before you'll even potentially be able to pitch your solution. You can be talking about it a lot. So in terms of the proximity to the problem or getting close to the feedback of the end users, like you're in service, you understand the importance of being close to customer feedback to be able to deliver the right service. In defense, that loop of feedback doesn't exist in the same way. And there's always opportunity for them to introduce new ways of closing the feedback loop from the end user, who's not essentially the customer who's going to be buying that product or the solution, because the people on the ground or out on the field are actually the end users of the technology or the device or whatever it might be. But there is always room to close a loop of feedback so they can iterate. I mean, we're seeing a lot of this happening in real time in Ukraine, simply because they have to. They didn't have time to take as long for those feedback loops to keep iterating and putting out new products. Do you have any suggestions from a service perspective on how this loop of feedback to continue iteration and speeding up the innovation process could be implemented into defense?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I'm a defense expert, but the part that we've always done is take the time to really understand the pathway and the people, because they're all people at the end of the day. And even just last week, we had a customer dinner. We had a worldwide Atlassian conference and people flying in, and it was in Anaheim, and last year it was in Anaheim as well. And I met with a customer who flew in from India, and at the hotel, the only thing on the menu they could have was a fruit bowl. And I was like, this is terrible. So this year, we scouted out within a 15-mile radius the best Indian restaurant, and we found one through our network. And we thought, okay, well, we'll have half a dozen people, maybe 10 show up. We ended up with 53.
Right.
And the customers were all talking to each other, and the engineers and the sales teams from Atlassian. Like it was just a great event, all driven through empathy. And I'm getting reach outs like saying, hey, can you do that next year? Where is it next year? Can I come? And so I think what I would be applying to some of these pieces is there's always the rules.
Yeah.
Of, okay, this is the way you should do a dinner. This is the way you should, and definitely respect those and learn those, but don't be afraid to think outside the square a little bit or outside the box a little bit about how you can short circuit or build more relationships or get a better perspective. So for me, it would be like just learning and understanding what happens throughout that process.
Yes.
And building in ways and being very open to it versus waiting. And of course, there's protocols and boundaries and things. You don't want to be pushing the boundary and annoying a bunch of folks. But sometimes we self-impose rules that actually aren't there.
Yeah, that's very true. And look, in defense, it is a very traditional industry where there are a lot of the conferences are a bit more old school. It's very traditional. You walk around with your business cards and you do follow-ups in a traditional manner. It's less social. There are definitely social aspects, but it's also very small little silos and pockets of various groups catching up. But the building of the personal relationships is key, no matter where you go, no matter what sector you're in.
You mentioned a cool thing there. Like I have business cards.
Yes.
Like at the conference, I give them out and without fail, half the people say, "Oh, wow, you have cards?" I'm like, yes.
Yes.
Right. I think there is something about being the most reliable, being following up, having the discipline, having the cadence. Those are fundamentals where folks want a reliable service provider. You know, folks want the predictability, not just the sizzle, right? So I think those principles standing behind any product are really important.
No, they're all good points and definitely something that we believe in as well. If you were to have the opportunity to offer somebody, say next time you come back to UTS or whatever your involvement is there, to offer an internship, like give somebody the opportunity that you had when you were younger, what sort of a person would you be looking for?
So we bring on folks all the time. I think we're looking for, the criteria is humble, hungry, and smart. And you're looking for the person that can be in the intersection of tech and people. It's interesting right now because we're starting to hire quite a lot out of university because we think that's the generation of AI native folks.
Yes.
That was
going to be my next question. I understand hungry, I understand humble, but I want to know your version of today's smart.
Oh, today's smart. There we go. You know, I think, we're going through a big adjustment right now. Companies are changing headcount and kind of fixing things up. And I think there's just adjustments going on. But I think the new generation that are coming out, have different realities, different expectations, even the way sales is done. I think for me, we actually do a lot of work here on kind of sports psychology.
Okay. Why is that?
Because it's very much performance.
Yes.
And athletes are peak humans, right? When you think about it. And so like we ran a whole series of work with the mental skills coach from the Utah Jazz. And part of his lessons and teaching people is like, Kobe Bryant, whether this is still the case or not, but, has missed the most amount of shots in the NBA.
Yes. Yep.
And the ability to reset on, my son works in the business, and I mentioned before he was playing American football, and that sport is about plays, resetting, right? Because every down you get, you got to, no matter what happened before, you've got to stop and restart and do that. Graham, a mental skills coach, calls that next play speed. How quickly can you get to the next play and forget what happened?
Well, that's what the form, grit comes from that, the ability to how quickly to recover. Yeah.
So the ability to cycle through those things, the entire team that my son is working on have that. They're like, wow, these folks are just.
What age bracket are we talking?
Through that. That age bracket is 20 to 23. Mm-hmm. That has that. We run ServiceRocket. We run a subject with UTS on change management every year.
Right.
And we've been doing that the last 2 years, but we had like 400 students this year. Sorry, late last year. We're about to do it again. And it's all about technology change management. And through that, I'm giving people, it's an odd course for them because we don't tell them exactly what to do.
They have to work it out.
They have to
manage the change process.
They have to design some technology and implement some change. And there is no right or wrong answer. The ability to adapt and see that. And it's interesting to do that. But I think, folks picking up technology quickly. We have had interns come in and build stuff that our team.
How good is that?
Like, wow, how did you do that? So quickly, right?
I think we're going to see more and more of that with the younger generations coming through with the skills they're acquiring at an earlier age.
Yeah. And it's the part where they've got those skills and they have enough of, it's almost like they need to enjoy a little bit of history to make up for the experience, right? Because the whole point of the subject the humanities of history is like get the wisdom without going through the hardship.
That's right.
And so there's a bit of that process of like, okay, teach me the history of why we did it this way and why we do it that way. And so I think that mindset of being curious and, I built a whole bunch of leadership behavior program for our team to be thinking about how do we coach these behaviors into all of us continually? Because I think there is that whole sporting analogy is we run our team like athletes. And you never see a world-class athlete say, you know what, I've done my training. I'm done. I don't need to train anymore. I'm world-class, right?
You know what? This sounds like the conversation I have with my own children, to be honest. Just getting them to do anything. Yeah, because it's true. You never hear that. You never hear that. And it's the easiest way to highlight when we say things that don't make any sense. It's like, well, do you think this behavior happens over here? How do you think those people keep getting better? Right? Or be ready to perform.
18 months ago, I went back in the field. So I actually consult.
Okay.
And I do consulting work. And a number of my peer CEOs or, competitors, I call them peers, they're like, why are you doing that? And I'm like, the world's changed.
You need to go and listen and be involved. This was 18
months ago. This was 18 months ago.
So it wouldn't have even been like
one of
today.
my lead guys said to me, Jonathan, he said, Rob, we need to see what you want us to be. And I was like, oh, that's good.
That's interesting.
That's really good. And so because the world had changed, right, we moved off a consulting model of like timesheets and more, we now do milestones and outcomes. It's more easily said than done. And so what better way to debug that and learn about it than to get in the trenches with the team and work with them?
So did you become the person that they can visibly see?
They definitely see me. I see them a lot more. I see a lot of things they're doing, and it makes the iteration of building the systems
faster.
And building the processes better, right? And so culturally, it works really well in our company, and but it doesn't work in every company because some companies are not set up that way. And I think when you're founder led, you have an advantage.
Yes, you get to choose.
You are the leader, and you don't. There's a time when the king needs to sit in the throne. There's a time when the king needs to be in the trenches, right? And I think in founders, more often than not, we need to be in the trenches.
Yes. Yeah, and not lose sight. Well, if you move away, you need to not lose sight of it either, but have an ability to touch base. Excellent. Well, Rob, thank you so much. We could definitely talk more about this. I'm really interested in the performance stuff and also the leadership pieces that you've worked on, developed, and then implemented in the team. Although that's probably a conversation for another time. We'll have to get you back on at some stage, or hopefully touch base when you're here in Australia.
Yeah. I do maintain a Substack called leadershipbehaviors.org.
I've had a read of some of those. Yep.
So folks can kind of borrow a bunch of stuff from there, and I registered both spellings. So.
To cover both the Australian and the US versions.
Yeah, to cover both of them. So
we struggle with the defense C and S all the time. Not struggle, but it's just always like, who are we writing for? Who's reading this? Are we putting it here? And how might it be perceived? So it's an ongoing thing.
Very good.
Excellent. Thanks very much for your time, Rob. And I think there is absolutely a lot of golden nuggets and wisdom and lived experience that a lot of people will take on board and benefit from hearing you today. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us in the briefing room. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with the people shaping our national security and future capability. If you liked what you heard, please follow the show, share it with a friend, and join us next time for more stories and insights from the front lines of innovation. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and keep building the future.